I'll just begin by briefly introducing the Mill series, for those of you who have not attended it before. And for that, perhaps a more timely strategy is to clarify what it's not. The Mill series is not a conservative platform. We're entirely non-partisan. A brief survey of our past speakers should settle any doubts there. What we are is defined by what we believe in, which is to promote a greater viewpoint diversity at Lafayette College. We see honest and unfettered dialogue between political and ideological opponents as necessary for the pursuit of truth. At the risk of sounding a little platitudinous, I should say that there is considerable value in convening in a room and civilly disagreeing even on the most fundamental questions. As someone who grew up in a militarized territory where people stake and even lose their lives to speak their mind, to write their mind, I find it almost counterintuitive that the value of civil disagreement needs reiteration and continual defense at colleges in the United States.
It is a surreal pleasure to welcome Camille Paglia to Lafayette. Paglia is the University Professor of Humanities and Media Studies at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, where she has taught since 1984. She received her BA from the State University of New York at Binghamton in 1968, and her MPhil and PhD degrees from Yale University in 1971 and 1974, respectively. Professor Paglia's first book, Sexual Personae, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson, published in 1990, was an expansion of her doctoral dissertation. Among her other books are Break, Blow, Burn, a study of poetry, and Glittering Images, a study of art from ancient Egypt to George Lucas's Star Wars. Her book on Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds was published by the British Film Institute in 1998. Her seventh book, Free Women, Free Men, Sex, Gender, Feminism, was released by Pantheon this past March. Professor Paglia was a co-founding contributor and columnist for Salon.com, beginning with its debut issue in 1995. She has written numerous articles on art, literature, popular culture, feminism, education, religion, and politics for publications around the world. Please join me in welcoming Professor Paglia to Lafayette.
Thank you so much, Brandon. All right, well, let me make a few remarks before we start the visuals. And that is that many of the arguments that I have with opponents, I think are due to the very long-range historical perspective that I have. Many people, in not only in gender studies but in other fields of literary criticism, today, think really in terms of the present. They're guilty of what is called presentism. Many of in my view, of the postmodernist and post-structuralist theories that are pandemic in academia only work, if they work at all, to the period following the Enlightenment. Right? But my historical range is really from antiquity on, and what we're going to begin with tonight is from the Stone Age. I think that this is a very serious problem in current academic thought in North America as well as in England, less so in South America and continental Europe. That is, there is just simply, in my view, an absence of hard knowledge of the past and an absence also of genuine research into world cultures. I think that is what needs to be brought rather than political ideology, to college curriculum. Okay, so let me give you an example. I am very focused on the idea of traditions coming down over the centuries. The master argument of Sexual Personae, my first book based on my dissertation, is that Judeo-Christianity never did defeat paganism. This is my argument, and that the pagan tradition, which with its homosexuality, androgyny, sadomasochism, and goddess worship, went underground and erupted at three key moments. Everyone would agree that happened at the Renaissance. That's what the Renaissance is. Okay, it's a revival of Greco-Roman humanism. There's no argument there. Then I say it also went underground and erupted at Romanticism. where I see the Dionysiac element, the nature worship element in paganism surfacing. And then my third term, the third eruption, I argued was in Hollywood. Okay, that is the whole explosion of modern popular culture with its great sex symbols and goddesses and so on. And so everything I do really is about very expansive historical traditions. For example, right now in my Art of Song Lyrics course, we're having our midterm exam this week, all right, I talk about the history of African American music and how we can trace elements in it all the way back to West African traditions, not only the call and response, but polyrhythms and even the melisma, okay, the slide, okay, which we hear in slide guitar, which is probably Islamic in origin and has to do with Islamic presence in West Africa. And we've been talking about the blues tradition, spirituals, okay, and the emergence, okay, into popular culture thanks to modern technology of African American performers. First, the Big Mama type of blues singers, followed by, we're about to begin, the creators of torch singing, Lena Horne, Billie Holiday, et cetera, okay? And similarly, I have a concern with tradition in the project I've been pursuing for 9 years, which is I've been doing work in the library as well as in the field into Native American remnants in our region. Okay, I am particularly interested in Native American culture following the retreat of the glacier 10,000 years ago. As I do my research, I am very unhappy with the focus, when people speak of the Lenni Lenape Indians and so on, there is a lot of focus on New Jersey Indians and on the Susquehannocks, okay, to the west in Pennsylvania. But our region, okay, this region here, from the Lehigh Valley all the way down to Philadelphia, is very much neglected. And I have found many artifacts, and this I think is truly the summation of my studies of archaeology for my entire life. Okay, so again, tradition. This is at the heart of what I offer, okay, as a thinker and as a writer. Okay, so I think we're ready to begin. Okay, good. Now, what I'm going to be showing you is a series of images about which there can be some, gender discussion. What we're looking at right now. Brandon, why has the image disappeared from my...
Oh, that's right. Forgive me.
Okay, all right.
What just happened? All right, hold on. It disappeared from here?
All right.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's number 2.
Yep, so we'll go back. Hold on. Sorry. My apologies. I'm not sure why that happened. Hopefully
all right, hopefully it'll stay. Okay. All right, so there are a series of questions about gender that these images I can present to us. So what we're looking at here, 3 different views of the Venus of Willendorf, so-called. Venus is, of course, a joking name because that's the name of the goddess of beauty, love and beauty in the later Roman period. But this is from the Stone Age. This object is very small. It's barely 5 inches tall. It's meant to be held in the hand, probably. It was found in a riverbank in Austria. It's at least 20,000, 25,000 years old. And this particular slide allows us to see remnants of the red paint that was on this image. Red ochre was considered sacred and highly meaningful to many cultures, including Native Americans of our own region. I myself, in walking in the woods, have seen and very spookily a tree had fallen, and I saw a huge amount of red ochre in the earth, and I knew immediately that was an Indian burial from probably could have been from 1,000 years ago. But what does this suggest to us about the early image of woman? Now, here's one of the big issues that I have with current gender studies. That is the utter erasure of biology, okay, from consideration. I have maintained for decades that it was crucial that biology be made a required field of study for anyone teaching or learning about gender studies. And the idea that we are simply the product of social pressures is rampant Rousseauism. That I talk about this in my book, Sexual Personae. I think that even if one wants to dismiss the influence of gender, the influence of biology in definition of gender, that one needs at least to study it so that people are speaking in scientific terms and not trying to deal with biology refracted through postmodernism and poststructuralism, which is what the present situation is. As we look at this is a primary object in my book, Sexual Personae. We see that this is a period of human life when fertility was absolutely crucial to human survival. So that's what a woman is. Okay? And this is before the scientific operations of procreation were understood. But we're seeing, we feel, from this object, the force of nature, the force of biology. Woman does not exist here as an individual, but as someone who essentially is a conduit for natural forces. And I think that it's crucial for young people in this age where everything works so well. Everything works so well in our society, in terms of economics, in terms of the infrastructure of things, that people don't realize how close we are to absolute anarchy again. Okay, I mean, I feel that too many people have been swept up into a utopian vision, okay, of human life, a progressivist vision. And here I'm using the word in the 19th century sense, the Victorian sense, who are imagining that we're moving toward the perfect state, the paradise state. All human problems will be solved. There will be no more illness. There'll be no more suffering. There won't be any death, etc., etc. Well, this to me is naive. Okay? When we look at history, I believe that history moves in cycles, right? And that back in the 17th, 18th centuries, wealthy British families sent their sons to go view the ruins of the Roman Empire, okay, the ruins of Rome, to go to contemplate, okay, what used to be called the vanity of human wishes. And to realize that, that one of the most powerful entities in the history of the world, the Roman Empire, fell into rubble. Okay, all of the great empires of antiquity, whether you're did the same. Okay, whether you're talking about Egypt or Assyria or Babylon, all in ruin. Right? The idea that Western culture, as is presently constituted, is going to go on and on until finally we attain this perfect state where all suffering is erased. It seems to me absolute madness. We have not experienced war, and we don't. I think most young people don't realize how close we are. Okay, all it takes is one huge natural disaster, the asteroid hitting the Earth, or the super volcano going off that they keep on predicting, is going to go off in the West. All right, all of a sudden we'll be back scrabbling once again, like these people in the Stone Age. Okay, which is why it's important for young people to be introduced to these objects. All right, so here we are at a time when that's not a knit cap she has on her head, but rather braided hair. Okay? And I notice how she exists simply as a series of protuberances. So the fat in this era meant health. It meant survival. Okay? The cult of the thin woman is really one of a sophisticated, more urban or aristocratic period. You'll notice that she's defined by her fat deposits, by the buttocks, by the belly, hips, and breasts. Her arms are nothing but small flippers on the top of her breasts. And then the feet, repeatedly in these Stone Age objects, have been broken off. Okay, a ritual breaking off. This is not the result of accidental damage. And my theory about it is that she's supposed to represent the principle of fertility. They want fertility to stay because of the tremendous difficulties of remaining pregnant in a period of constant famine and near starvation and so on. They want her to remain, so they break her feet off. So she's like a kind of a magic a talisman for them. Okay, so now I'm going to go. Okay. We're having to do this. Okay, there we go. Okay, all right. Now this is the so-called Venus of Lovecell. Okay? It's also from this period, and this is from an area in the south of France. And once again, we see the protuberances, the fat around the hips and thighs. And we see the sort of saggy breast, which suggests that this is a kind of mother figure who has nursed many times before. She has her head evidently in profile. We probably can assume that she's in profile. And she's holding up something magical, a magical object that people have disagreed about. Is it a phallic ram's horn? Is it an emblem of the moon itself with markings for the months? It's not clear what. But this whole block was removed from a rock shelter. Okay, these objects are definitely descending to us from a nomadic period when people had no home, had to follow the food supply, and probably it's from that period as the glacier was withdrawing, okay, in Europe, and you're starting to get people moving upward. The herds, okay, would be following the melting of the glacier, and possibly the food supplies had been cut off, and people were suffering from famine. This elevation of fat as good, okay, is coming at a time when probably people were suffering from the opposite, from an absence of food. Okay, so let me go next. Let's see. We're having a little. Okay, here we go. Okay, now this is a very interesting object. We're seeing the front and back view of it. As we're moving on in history, it's still the Stone Age, but you can see that there's a movement toward abstraction, so you hardly know what you're looking at here, but it's obviously a version of exactly the same thing. You can see it's a woman's figure. She is half leaning over these gigantic breasts. On the left, you can see they almost look like pontoons. Okay? And she's got these tiny little toothpick arms over them. Okay, and then look how her hips are swelling. You see the pudendum, and then the thighs dwindle down to nothing. Okay, you see that there's hardly even a suggestion that there had been feet. But how we're moving toward abstraction, if we just saw this object without knowing what it was, we might think it's something from modern art. Okay, so again, the centrality of woman and of woman's fertility, and of this dates from a period in which human beings did not understand how pregnancy occurred. Okay, because there is a delay between sexual intercourse, okay, and a woman's pregnancy showing. Primitive man did not believe that he was in any way responsible for a birth, and somehow it was a woman in magical communication with nature who had this internal power. So this is a time when you have to propitiate the forces of nature. Okay, let me move on. And okay, now even further abstraction. This is a Cycladic image. Okay, where now the Cyclades are islands, the Greek islands. Here now I'm going to give you some exact dates. Okay, so now this is around 2500 BC. And you see how the female body is being thought of in far more mathematical terms. There's no more these giant breasts. Instead, these just tiny little, almost spring-like nubs. Okay, and the bosom, the arms are folded. But we see very clearly an inverted triangle that represents the delta region that represents the female genitals. She's much longer, and her legs. She actually has feet. Okay, all right, and then we have this strange and very modern-seeming head. Communing with something, with forces, perhaps forces from the sky. It's possible that we are setting up these images in museums the wrong way. They were never intended to be seen like this, but rather recumbent. But in any case, the face is still upward, and in some way channeling the forces of the moon and the stars and so on. So always, throughout history, at the start, a woman is connected with nature. So this is a problem for modern feminism. That is, in its laudable attempt, okay, to give women, which I totally believe in, equality of opportunity in the political or social realm, there has been a kind of denigration, okay, of women's connection with nature. I think that probably most people, most of the theorists in gender studies would absolutely reject the idea that woman has any, women in general, even today, have any special connection to nature. And so I committed heresy, you see, in Sexual Personae by arguing that menstruation, a monthly process, in fact, is indeed a remnant of woman's greater knowledge of and connection to nature. And that's not something that I think is bad. I think it's something that should be embraced. It should not affect in any way every door being open to women's advance in professional and political life. Okay, so let me move on. All right, now here we are into Minoan creed. No one really knows what these objects are. It's only speculation. People have called this a goddess. People have called it a snake priestess. It's obvious there's some sort of a ritual where women are handling serpents. All right, and there is a motif of the Eastern Mediterranean. This is from the island of Crete. That there was a phrase, mistress of the beasts. Okay, the idea that woman has this kind of special connection to animal nature. She has I think you can see, she has a lion sitting on her head. Okay, as well. It's strange because we've got this. She's clearly a descendant of the kinds of fertility images that we've been looking at. But now we're into a period of high fashion. Okay, of civilization, of structure. The breasts, seem almost as if they're full of milk, as if possibly she's nursing, but the waist is extremely thin. Okay, this is the beginning of the cult of the wasp waist. Okay, in the European taste. Right, she's wearing a garment. She's entirely covered, even with sleeves, except for these bare breasts, and then this very elaborate tiered skirt with what appears to be a ritual apron of some sort. So this is also kind of starting the tradition of woman as an object who is projected as the ultimate fashionable creature. But this is an issue that feminism, I think, is still grappling with. There are pro-fashion feminists and anti-fashion feminists, but I myself have been influenced in my attitude. I am not fashionable myself. I've never been fashionable. I never will be fashionable. Right? But I have been heavily influenced by gay men. Okay, and gay men are in modern times are absolutely the major arbiters of fashion. It goes all the way back through my idol, Oscar Wilde, who wrote fashion articles, for the magazines of the time, etc. Okay, so it is true that that the male mind does project, abstractions with which women have to deal, in society. But you have to ask, if we abandon fashion altogether. For example, Susan Faludi's book, The Bible of 1990s Feminism Backlash, was allowed to get away with really homophobic imputations about the great fashion designers. Susan Faludi was making the charge that the fashion designers, implicitly gay, don't like women, hate women, and try to make them look ridiculous. All right, and how she got away with that, I have no idea. That's not my view of fashion, certainly. But there was a period in early second wave feminism in the early 1970s when feminists tried to look as dowdy as possible. There was a period there where people wore earth shoes and so on. But I think now, ever since the 1980s, a great period of pro-sex feminism, which crested in the 1990s, that's the movement, wing of feminism I belong to. There was a whole type of feminists, the new lipstick lesbians, who were invented in San Francisco, and now half the feminists in the world are highly fashionable. The other half remain dowdy. But there's no longer a kind of monolithic attitude, I think, about fashion. I myself am fascinated, by it because I do view the history of fashion as the history of the arts. But of course, I've been teaching in art schools also, for most of my career. Okay, wait, let me go on. Okay. All right, now, yes, here we are in Mesopotamia, and this is the goddess Ishtar, all right, who a goddess of war and sex, but not really a mother goddess, interestingly enough. The Babylonian image splits sex, from procreation. You can see how she has the talons, on her feet. She's truly the mistress of the beasts in the usual way. We have owls and the big cats and so on. But I'm very interested in women were perceived in Babylon, because Babylon has such a bad reputation, you see, in the Hebrew Bible. The whore of Babylon, in fact, okay, is like a superstar, okay, who ends the Bible. Okay, she's in the book of Revelations, the book of the Apocalypse, which ends the New Testament, and you get this vision, okay, of the whore of Babylon on her seven-headed beast, and she holds up a gold cup full of the wine of her fornications. I won't go into detail about what that's supposed to be, okay, but I think she's fabulous, the whore of Babylon, right? And this is part of my argument, you see, that the whore of Babylon was reincarnated in the great modern sex stars of Hollywood. I mean, one of the most influential movies on me, okay, was Butterfield 8, okay, where Elizabeth Taylor was playing a high-class call girl in New York City, and she won an Oscar for that. I mean, that to me remains a template, okay, for what to me the power of woman. And I think one of the issues for so many contemporary young women and who are trying to study feminism, see what is useful to them in it, and so on, is that we have a complete absence of any kind of, to me, interesting, sexy women in entertainment right now. So this is a problem. Okay? If you've never seen what a powerful, magnetic, sexual woman looks like, okay, then you're always going to blame men for somehow constructing it in their own perverted imaginations. Right? And this is an issue that I think is afflicting North America at the moment, and perhaps the United Kingdom as well. Because when I go to Brazil, okay, or I go to Italy, I see a lot of truly sexy women, okay, and I don't see them in America, okay. So this is what part of our problem over here, okay. All right, is that where you have powerful women in movies now, they're kind of caricatures, they're kind of cartoons, like Wonder Woman. Here she is, boom, 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 boom. Okay, well that's great, okay. Because I call my philosophy of feminism Amazon feminism, so that's fine, okay. But I also honor, okay, the great sex symbols, okay, of the history of movies. I just was in Brazil in August, speaking in Salvador de Bahia, and I was sitting there in the airport, right, waiting for my plane, and my mouth was hanging open. I saw one fabulous woman after another just strutting along, and the men just following like slaves, okay, all right, to these women. All right, there's nothing like that right now in the United States. Okay. All right, let me go on from Ishtar. Okay, here we go. All right. Now you see here is Isis with her son Horus on her lap, and this is a small object, a small statuette. She's actually nursing him. She has her right hand on her breast. Horus is the product of her incestuous relationship with Osiris, the great god Osiris. And she holds on her head at this right in here. It's a hieroglyph actually representing the throne of Egypt. In fact, she is, that's what she is, the throne of Egypt. She is what confers kingly authority on Pharaoh in ancient Egypt. Now I want to mention Isis because her worship was extremely widespread throughout the entire Mediterranean. Rome itself had temples of Isis, and it is universally acknowledged now that this motif of the mother goddess holding her son on her lap is the model, is the template for the Madonna in Child, as it developed in Christian iconography in the centuries after paganism in southern Europe. In fact, there's absolutely no doubt. When Martin Luther, we're approaching here the 500th anniversary at the end of October of Martin Luther's nailing of his 95 Theses on the cathedral door in Wittenberg. There's absolutely no doubt that the complaint of the Protestant reformers, right, that the cult of Mary in southern Catholicism, Southern European Catholicism, was not based in anything biblical. That complaint was absolutely correct. Okay, if you've been raised as a Italian Catholic or Spanish Catholic, Mexican Catholic, okay, you will think of Mary as practically dominating, okay, your understanding of Christianity, mother and child, right? But then when you look at the Bible, it's absolutely amazing how little part Mary plays in the Bible. It's like, oh, there goes Mary. Oh, Okay, it's like absolutely minimal. Okay, the cult of Mary and her child, okay, the baby Jesus, right, is definitely a continuation of the cult of Isis. Okay, in European, Southern European Catholicism, and then as exported by the Spanish, into Mexico and in Central America. All right, so there we have that even today. Okay. All right, now I want to show you something that the way the masculine and the way rulership, the strong male political figure, is portrayed, contrasting Mesopotamian culture with Egyptian society. Okay, what we're looking at here, you can see the enormous size of this object. There's a chair to the left with a glass on it, and this is, I believe, this is in the Louvre. And we're looking at at the gate. This creature is called a lamassu. Okay, it is a hybrid creature guarding the portal of a city, of a citadel. You've got a bull, bull's body, bull's feet, and the wings of an eagle, and then the head of a man. The horns of the bull are, you can see them there. And the peculiarity of it is that it's meant to be seen from the front as well as the side, so there are really 5 legs. Right? So now you see that this stress on muscularity, as a definition of masculinity in these Mesopotamian cultures. Let me go on, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. All right, here, this is another one. Let me get the exact. This is actually this statue is from Assyria. It's actually 15 feet tall. It's from the throne room of King Sargon the second, from about 700s BC. All right, and again, you see this assertion of muscularity, the heavy, the very virile, heavy beard. You've got this clawing lion being contained by the swelling muscles of the left arm, and then that's actually a curved blade associated with royal power in his right hand. Okay, so I want you to contrast this with a quite different way that the Egyptians thought of their own male rulers. Okay, we're going to go on. All right, here's another example. This is actually a winged genie, which is quite widespread as an image in Mesopotamian art. This is from Nimrod, which is one of the major Assyrian cities from about 800 BC. The same thing, okay? You see look at the calf muscles in particular, okay? And then the muscles of the forearm, right? There's a kind of rigidity, okay? Heavy beard again, okay? So heavy, there's the sense of virilization. All right, and then, all right, now we switch over. This is the Old Kingdom, and we're looking at the Pharaoh Mycerinus and his wife. And can you see that this is very consistent, okay, in the portrayal of Pharaoh now for thousands of years. There is a sense of power, okay, but yet there's this slim physique, okay. There's a sense of smoothness. You have an artificial beard, which is a symbol of pharaonic power. But the expression on the face is always serene, almost visionary, a sense of connectedness, okay, with the divine. Yes, it's an assertion of royal force, okay, but without that kind of overkill, of the hypermuscularity of the Mesopotamian kings and the genies. All right, now here this is the great Khephren, okay, whose face is also on the face of the Great Sphinx at Giza. I'm always looking for a good slide of it. I never quite find the one I want. This is in green diorite, and here's the same thing. Okay, you can see his ceremonial beard, okay, is broken, but you can see that that's added. That particular headdress is symbolic of pharaonic power in Egypt. But the same thing. Look how he looks into the distance. There's a sense. There's almost kind of a contemplative sense. A feeling that of calm, of composure. There's no sense of crushing the people of Egypt beneath your beneath pure physical force. And this is one of my favorite groups. This is, again, Old Kingdom. It's Rahotep, the son of a pharaoh, okay, and his wife, Nafret. And they are shown as of equal size, which is unusual, at the level of Pharaoh. Okay, we saw Mycerinus and his wife actually at the same level, but as the centuries go on, even the queens are shown at a smaller height, and so on. I think you sense here the kind of formidable power of the Egyptian women. And we have some evidence that women had property rights and other benefits that were not typical at all of women in other Middle Eastern regions. But she looked like she was about to stand up and speak. These are painted limestone tomb sculptures that we're looking at here. Now, let me also mention that in ancient Egypt, right, a skin color was an indicator not of race but of class, of social class. Okay? That is, upper class women did not have to work in the sun, and therefore their skin color was always lighter than that of the peasant women and the women that we see making beer and so on in tomb paintings. The men in Egyptian art are shown with brown or red skin, and the women are shown with yellow, okay, or white skin. Right? And that went on for thousands of years, right, right into the 19th century in Europe, okay, where women, upper class women and upper middle class women carried parasols to protect them from the sun because alabaster or a skin indicated that you were a person of social status and wealth, as opposed to the peasant women who worked in the fields. And that went on right until Coco Chanel, okay, in the 1920s broke the rule. Okay, went out on a yacht, got sunburned, okay, and suddenly tans were in. Okay, so all of a sudden throughout the 20th century, a white woman with a tan, okay, in the middle of the winter is signifying her wealth, that she's able to go off to St. Bart's or whatever. Okay, and meanwhile everyone else has a toilet in an office. Okay, and they look very pallid. So we've had a kind of reversal of that in the Caucasian world. All right, now here, okay, so here is much closer to the Mesopotamian, the Assyrian or Babylonian model of kingship. These are 60 feet tall, okay, images of Ramesses II at his temple, which is way up the Nile. The Arab name is Abu Simbel. These monuments were completely forgotten and rediscovered, covered with sand, in the early 19th century. But here Ramesses II, people think, is the pharaoh of the Bible. He's the pharaoh of the great movie shown at Easter, the Ten Commandments, which I always recommend to my students because it gives a much better sense of history than anything they're being taught, okay, by any post-structuralist of the moment. All right, and the role of Ramesses is played by Yul Brynner. Okay, he's this is the pharaoh evidently who would not let the people go, okay, and who lives on in the great spiritual, go down Moses and so on. All right, so here's this is fairly rare, okay. This overwhelming assertion of male force. Okay? And actually, Ramesses' own wife Nefertiti was one of them, she was one of the most interesting figures of the history of Egypt, and he almost treated her as an equal. She's one of the very few queens who has her own funerary temple next, or it's actually a temple in honor of her spirit, which is right near his on. The entire mountain actually had to be cut in pieces when a lake was created by the construction of the Aswan Dam, and all of these monuments would have been flooded except for an international appeal for funds to cut the entire thing into blocks, and the whole mountainside was raised up. That's what we're seeing right now. You can see the relative size of the statues to the tourists there. Okay, now these are what we're seeing here. Okay, is a queen. Okay, this is one of the kind of heretic figures of Egyptian history. This is Hatshepsut. These objects are in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. They had an enormous impact on me when I saw them as a preschool child. It made me fall in love with ancient Egypt. I wanted to be, the first thing I wanted to be was an Egyptian archaeologist, because I certainly had no idea when I saw these objects that it was a woman. Okay, and these her memory was totally lost. Okay, until modern archaeology recovered her, because her name was struck out of the historical records of the list of pharaohs, and her monuments were destroyed. What we're seeing here is actually a reconstructed piece. I mean, you can these objects were portraits of her were smashed into pieces at her funerary temple and then dumped into a quarry. Modern archaeologists have reassembled them here. Right? So, but she had herself shown with the traditional pharaonic beard, you see, which is a symbol of pharaoh's power, and also the traditional headdress. Okay? So here she is as a sphinx, and this piece is 11 feet long, and it weighs something like 2 tons. Now then we have another one coming up here. Let me get another one. Okay, here's another one, and actually there's 2 of them here. Perhaps you can see the signs of the breakage, and whether they've had to fill in places where they were unable to recover the pieces. Here she is kneeling, offering votive bowl, sacrifices to the gods. She has the pharaonic beard, the male headdress as well, okay? And you can see how easy it would have been to imagine this was a male figure. Who could imagine this was a queen? So Hatshepsut, a very interesting figure, and at the time when I was young, the Metropolitan Museum was displaying these far more dramatically. This seems to be very depressingly lined up in a corridor. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, they were in a gallery. I can remember how overwhelmed I was by them. And it turns out that this was a gender-bending kingship. Okay, let me go into another. Now here, we have a rare example of a woman being associated with a great architectural breakthrough, because Hatshepsut's funerary temple, okay, this is called today by the Arab name Deir el-Bahri, when it's across the Nile from the city of Luxor. This is the very first building, okay, that used the colonnade facing outward. Okay, that is, up to this point in Egyptian architecture, if there were pillars, a colonnade where you could walk in and out, okay, of a colonnade around the pillars. Those were in enclosed courtyards. This is the first time that a colonnade was turned outward, and we have several tiers of it. You see, you go up on terraces. The whole thing would have been filled with sculptures and also vegetation and trees and all kinds of things were originally planted around it and so on. So this is the origin, okay, here in this temple. Of the Greek style of architecture. Okay? Every Greek temple, with columns facing outward, with steps leading up, inviting you to walk up the steps and walk along the colonnade and so on, as in the major buildings and temples of ancient Athens. All of that can be traced back to this building. Now it was reconstructed, partly reconstructed in an imaginative way, apparently in a slightly inaccurate way. So it looks rather dreary right now, kind of like a shopping mall, doesn't it? But you just have to take my word for it. Okay, this is a great architectural monument. Right? Now, over the back of this great cliff would be the Valley of the Kings, okay, where so many of the pharaohs were buried. So this is association of woman with architecture, woman with citadel, and so on. I'm going to return to that presently. All right. Now, here is another one of the rebels, okay, of the history of Egypt. And this is Akhenaten, who had the idea of monotheism, a worship of one god as opposed to the many gods, of ancient Egypt. His name was also totally lost because he defied the extremely powerful priesthood of ancient Egypt and built a city on his own, which is today called by the Arab name Tel El Amarna. Right? But after his death, his city was destroyed, his name struck out, okay, and everything about him and his family was lost, okay, to knowledge until the 20th century. So the thing about him is that he was clearly defying the masculine code of rulership. Okay? He presented himself never as a warrior or as a conqueror, but as a religious figure, a visionary, okay, worshiping the one god Aten. Okay? And he demanded that he be shown in a naturalistic way with all of his physical faults. It's clear that he had some sort of disease. People disagree about what it was he might have had, but he has really a half-feminine kind of a silhouette with a large belly, large hips and thighs, a kind of sunken chest, okay, a elongated face. Okay? So he suffered from something, but the way he presents himself in art is as a man who loves his family, okay, and is affectionate with his family. Okay, so let's go forward here. So here he is with his queen, Nefertiti, who we'll see in a moment. And here he is sitting with her and their children. And look, the pharaoh is picking up one of his children and kissing the child. This is hardly the way that the Mesopotamian kings would have shown themselves, or any of the other pharaohs would have shown themselves. All right, so a man the Egyptian artists don't really have any way to show human beings in a natural, relaxed setting, so they're sort of like feeling their way. It looks a little bit awkward to us, obviously, today. But above them is the one god, Aten, like the sun, reaching out and raised with little tiny hands, also caressing the king and the queen. So you see probably, by the way, whatever disease Akhenaten suffered from was the result of incest, of intermarriage. The Egyptian dynasties tended to marry brothers, tended to marry sisters, because they were thought to be a special caste, divine essence. And over time, of course, when you do that, when you have that kind of inbreeding, whatever genetic defects there might be or weaknesses tend to be reinforced, and you get all kinds of things. All right, so let's go forward. Now the bust of Nefertiti was discovered in the ruins of Tel El Amarna in 1912 by German archaeologists. That's why the bust is in Berlin right now. Okay, and it has become, since its discovery, really a symbol of world art. Okay, I've been obsessed with it, since I was a child. My parents had a little white plaster copy of it that was always on in our living room, and I did the dusting, okay, and so on. I was always dusting it, okay, and my parents had it sitting on the Gombrich book, The History of Art, right? So this is how I was raised, right? All right, with my kind of ritualistic attendance to the bust of Nefertiti. All right, so you can see there was a sense about the women of this dynasty, okay, that they seem more powerful than the men, okay. It could well be that Akhenaten, because of his maybe artistic side, his spiritual side, was not particularly interested in governing, and that the women of this dynasty did the governing. And this is some speculation. I mean, certainly Nefertiti seems extremely powerful. Every representation we have of her suggests, okay, her power. Now let me show you his mother, Akhenaten's mother. Okay, and I love her. Okay, Queen Tiye. Okay, Tiye. Look at Queen Tiye. Okay, all right. Now, I mean, to me, she resembles Angela Bassett. Okay, like in the movie How Stella Got Her Groove Back. For example. I wish they would make a movie of this dynasty, and I want Angela Bassett playing this role. But I think you can see. Okay, the Queen Tiye was probably in charge a lot of things. Right? This is one of the most powerful images, I think, portraits of a woman. Okay, that has survived. Okay, from antiquity. And by the way, I should mention, in terms of the racial mix of the pharaohs, some of the pharaohs came more from northern Europe, northern Egypt. Some came more from the southern areas of Egypt that are closer to Nubia, closer to Central Africa. So there was a great racial mix among the pharaohs, and it's very clear that this, one of the most important of the dynasties, was highly African, okay, Central African in lineage. I think that you can see that, and also in King Tut, we'll see in a moment. Okay, here we go. Now, this is, we don't know who this is. This is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art collection, but it is tentatively identified as Queen Tiye also, okay? Perhaps at a younger phase of her life. But this is a magnificent fragment. I think it's wonderful that the Met is simply displaying it without any attempt to conserve it or to restore it or anything like that. To me, this is like a kind of symbol of woman's sexual allure, how you can project, okay, such mystique okay, from just this piece of a portrait, just the lips alone. Okay, I think that this is something that I fail to see how the lips of a man could ever convey. Okay, this kind of power. Right? This is one of my favorite things from any museum. All right. And now, okay, here is King Tut. Now, we're not Tutankhamun. We're not clear whether was King Tut who succeeded Akhenaten, his son, his nephew. It was some family relationship. But here also you can see, that this dynasty was African. And in fact, there's certain portraits of Akhenaten, the young Akhenaten, that I feel look like the young Michael Jackson. Okay, now I don't think this gives an entirely accurate sense of how warm the gold is. Okay, but I tried to find the best picture I could, the clearest picture, for you. This is the funeral mask. The tomb of King Tut was discovered and opened by a British archaeologist, Howard Carter, in 1922. And it just, in the Valley of the Kings, we can only imagine what must have been contained in the tomb treasure of the really principal pharaohs, okay? Because King Tut was a minor figure. He was on the throne for just a few years, of no importance, and it is staggering, the gold, okay? Something like 200 pounds of gold, okay? In his, in his funeral, he has 3 different coffins and so on. So what we're seeing here is this funeral mask with the gold and lapis lazuli. I think this is a very nice view of the pharaoh's artificial beard, okay? You see, and the use of eye makeup, okay, with the Egyptians, the war. Eye makeup to it was a way to keep parasites and flies out of their eyes in the marshy districts of along the Nile of Egypt and so on. But I think this also gives you a very good sense of the kind of serenity, the composure of the way that pharaohs were their power, pharaonic power was presented in Egypt. All right, now this is very interesting. Okay, here we have, this is the god of the Nile flooding, the god Hapi, H-A-P-I. He's shown here in 2 different versions. Hapi is always presented as intersex, okay, with a large belly and the sagging breasts of a woman. Okay, in other words, this is an androgynous symbolic figure who, and often the skin of Hapi would be either blue or green. So it's he's kind of a vegetation. She is kind of a vegetation god. What we're looking at right here is a motif that was frequently on the thrones, on the side of the thrones of the pharaohs. It is the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Okay, and wait, let me get it exactly. Okay, because one part of Egypt, okay, the Upper Egypt, which means the Egypt to the south, okay, the Upper Nile, okay, the Upper Egypt was represented by the lotus and the crocodile, okay, and the lower Egypt, the Lower Nile, was represented by the papyrus and the frog. So you actually can see those particular plants there, and this is using vegetation imagery, nature imagery to symbolize a political fact, which is this unification of the 2 parts of Egypt. Now, vegetation gods are frequently androgynous in history. Now, here, okay, we're switching forward here to a political theme. This is, people believe, this is Cleopatra, Queen Cleopatra, who was the last independent monarch of Egypt. This was essentially the government of Egypt was occupied by Greeks, by Macedonian Greeks for 300 years at the very end, after Alexander the Great's conquest. And when Alexander died, his generals divided up all of the empire which he had conquered, and you had the Macedonian general Ptolemy, Ptolemy, taking over Egypt. And then you have these generations of descent of the Ptolemies in Egypt. Cleopatra is the last of the Ptolemies. Did she have any Egyptian blood? People are not really clear about that, but it is assumed she did not, okay, because that would have have been used against her by her enemies, the Romans. Right? So so this is an interesting issue, which is woman as leader, woman as queen, woman as general. Okay, what happens when a woman is in charge of a military operation, etc. Because what happened at the end, which ruined her entire plans for world conquest, right? Was a tremendous defeat, okay, of herself and her then lover Mark Antony, the Roman general, in one of the most consequential battles of the world history, the naval battle at Actium, off promontory of Greece. Shakespeare writes about this in the important play Antony and Cleopatra. All right, so you have this moment when the balance of world power could have gone either way. Had Cleopatra and Mark Antony conquered Octavian at Actium, right, the center of power in the Mediterranean would have shifted to Africa. All right, but instead, okay, they were defeated, and Octavian became the first Roman emperor, Augustus. Right? And that great battle took place at Actium in 31 BC. The following year, 30 BC, Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide. All right, but Cleopatra is a fascinating figure to us. We're always, people are always debating her character. She was women in power are generally subject to every kind of a libel. Let's look at the two. We know she wasn't particularly beautiful. That we're pretty sure, okay? But she had some tremendous charisma and also tremendous mental and intellectual, facility, because she was a master of languages. Apparently knew 12. The Ptolemies before her never bothered even to learn Egyptian, and so on. But yeah, people were charmed by her. Now let me before you see it. So two quite different men were absolutely enamored of Cleopatra. Julius Caesar, okay, who we're looking at here, who was very ascetic. He could hardly drink a glass of wine without getting a headache and having epilepsy, a seizure, okay, and so on. All right. Intellectual, severe, didn't enjoy, and then we have the second one. Okay, here is Mark Antony. Okay, all right, Mr. Party. Okay, and so the men loved him. He loved to drink. He loved sex, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and two different men. Okay, fell for Cleopatra. All right, and it's not clear. Okay, what her what her actual biography was. We do know she had children, that she hoped that her son Caesarion, who was Caesar's son, would succeed her, but Octavian, soon Augustus, had Caesarion killed. So we have the entire end of Egyptian independence, okay, with the death of Cleopatra. Her palace at Alexandria, which is one of the most sophisticated cities in world history, had the great library of Alexandria there with all the every manuscript of anything ever written. She was a patron of the arts. There was earthquakes that submerged a great deal of her palace, but year by year they're always discovering something in the harbor. There are wonderful statues of her and so on. So she's one of the great conundrums of history. But we still have to ask what happened at Actium. Okay, the way the Roman historians have it, okay, is that Cleopatra fled, from the field of battle, and Mark Antony covered himself with shame, okay, by not staying with his men, but seeing her, leave, chased her all the way back to Egypt, and then was utterly humiliated because he had broken the code of Roman manhood, which is if you lose a battle, you kill yourself, and so on. All right, we know that when I was in high school, the fiasco of the movie Cleopatra starring Elizabeth Taylor, my idol, okay, came out. I mean, the way Elizabeth Taylor represents her is certainly far more beautiful than the real Cleopatra was. But I think that the way Caesar is played by Rex Harrison is absolutely brilliant. The way Mark Antony is played by Richard Burton, equally brilliant. And in fact, that movie would prove to be the end of Richard Burton's own career as what was likely to be a success. He was supposed to be the successor to Laurence Olivier as the great Shakespearean actor, okay, of his time. But he met Elizabeth Taylor, okay, on the set of Cleopatra, and now just wanted to go off with her and be on her yacht and be part of her world, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole Cleopatra story was replayed, okay, with the destruction of Richard Burton's theatrical career. And amazingly, it really is true what the movie shows, that Cleopatra was in Rome, okay. Julius Caesar took her to Rome, okay, and the people were scandalized, right? She was there when he was assassinated, okay, in 44 BC. And Caesar was so besotted with her, they had a gold statue of her as Isis, okay, erected in the temple of Venus, okay, which was supposed to be the ancestral, the origin of his own dynasty. And it just shows you, I mean, the power of woman, okay, to fascinate and destroy. I love that. Now, for contemporary feminism to try to get away, to throw that out, come on, okay, all right? This is one of the woman's sexual power, okay, can paralyze, okay, incapacitate, and yes, kill and destroy. It's true. Okay, we have many examples of it through history. All right, now let me keep going. All right, so now, okay, this is a new topic here, which is the way, I mentioned a tiny bit of this before, woman's connection, symbolic connection with architecture. Okay, so what we're seeing here is a sculpture of the embodiment of a city. Okay, we're seeing she is supposed to be the fortune, like Fortuna, the fortune of the great city of Antioch, which would be in modern Turkey. Okay, and you see what she's wearing on her head. She's wearing the citadel of the city on her head. Okay, so we have, it's called a mural crown. Okay. The Greek term for what she is Tyche, is Tyche, okay, which means, again, fortune and fate, okay, of the city. There are every great city of the period that's called Hellenistic, okay, the Hellenistic period that goes on for several hundreds of years after the classic period and before the Roman era, okay, had these images embodying the safety, okay, and prosperity of the city in a time that is very like our own. Okay, the Hellenistic period was like our own. A period that's unstable, anxious, ruled by strong men, okay, with like spasms of violence, okay, and people not being able to make sense, okay, of which direction the nation is going in, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many of these, figures. But this idea, you see, of fortune, okay, or chance being embodied in a woman, an allegorical or symbolic form, of a woman, it goes all the way down to, it'll go to the Wheel of Fortune, Fortuna, the Wheel of Fortune, which was a great medieval saga, but also ends up in casinos today, where you have the spinning wheel, the roulette wheel. You have the idea that luck is a lady luck. Okay, Frank Sinatra sang the song, luck, be a lady tonight, and so on. So what we're seeing here is the city of Antioch. Okay, the fortune of Antioch, holding the grain, which represents the wheat sheaves, the fertility of the surrounding fields. She has her foot on the river upon which the city is located, the river Orontes, beneath her. Right. And now here's another image, okay, of a divine figure who represents a city. This is a small copy of what would have been a colossal statue of Athena in Athens. She represents, again, the city. There's a persistent symbolism in antiquity that the virginity of a goddess, okay, is a guarantee of the safety and sanctity of the walls of that city, of the citadel of that city. Okay? An identification between a woman's virgin body and the city with impenetrable fortifications and walls. Right? That is absolutely persistent motif. So there was this gigantic statue, a colossal statue of Athena in the Parthenon on the top of the Acropolis in Athens. Right? And the word Parthenon means virgin temple. Parthenon, Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin. And we're seeing here a very, very interesting figure. This would have been an enormous size. This is a copy. The only copy we really have of it. It's in a ceramic form, but it's ancient. Okay, there were the remnants or some remnants of red and yellow paint on it. But the original Colossus would have been, it was probably wood with ivory and gold over it. Okay, all of her flesh would have been ivory and with things trimmed in gold. But so this image, though, of a goddess, really, it's a great kind of model for my particular philosophy of Amazon feminism. The woman armed, okay, woman armed, woman vigilant, okay, and woman taking charge. Okay? So let's look at the kind of iconography here. We see that she's got her left hand on a shield. And coiled behind the shield is a serpent, often accompanying divine figures of women, that we've seen this repeatedly. That serpent is the legendary founder of Athens, Eryxonius. Okay, and then she has in her left hand, in her right hand, okay, which is supported here by a pillar, simply because just to support the extended arm. She has landing on her palm a winged figure, which has lost its head. It's Nike, Nike, meaning victory. Okay, so Athena's bringing victory to her people, the Athenians. She's got a war helmet on. The flaps are up. Okay, they come down during war to protect the sides of the face. She's got the horses, rampant on her helmet, and then she's wearing, we'll see a close up of this, a shawl which is a goat skin. It's called the Aegis, Aegis. Okay, and this is given to her as a gift by her father Zeus. It is actually a thundercloud. Okay, and the Aegis is what her father would shake, and she can shake. If you shake it, thunderstorm. Okay, it comes down on people. So she has a power of nature. Then she's also got, I believe, her belt is composed of serpents as well. Let me see another view of it here. Yes. Okay. So this is a front view and a side view of this image of Athena Parthenos. And now I want to focus in on this image that's in the middle of her chest. Okay. All right. And you see there's Nike, the victory, landing on her hand. And we see the goat skin, this very rough thing around her shoulders. And then right in the middle is the head of Medusa, okay, Medusa, one of the most monstrous images of women of antiquity, and still, has a kind of power today. I want to show you a whole series here of this image of the Medusa. So you have to, in terms of much contemporary feminism, these images of woman as monster are misogynistic, they're this, they're that, and so on. But there's no doubt that Medusa, still has this potent force, to us. Now, what we're seeing here is, let me get the exact thing of what we're looking at. Okay, this is a painted terracotta Medusa from the 6th century temple of Athena at Syracuse, which is in Sicily, which had been settled by Greeks. Now, please notice how the way she's running in a swastika shape. Okay, the swastika used and abused by Hitler was actually an ancient image of life. We see it in a lot of art from India. You see it in Native American art and so on. It's a sign of primitive. It's a kind of a rolling, tumbling image of a person running. It represents a principle of vitality, a dynamic, biological, force. Really, she's winged. Okay, she's ugly. Okay, she has tusks coming out of her mouth. She's sticking her tongue out. Many representations of Medusa. She has snakes in her hair. She has tucked under her left arm is the winged horse Pegasus, whom she produces Pegasus. It doesn't quite make sense because it's when her head is cut off by the hero Perseus that the drops of blood fall on the earth and Pegasus springs up from that. But let me show you some other images of her. And she has just lingered as an image for a very long time. Here's another image of that. Okay, here's one from, which one is this? Okay, this is, what we're looking at here is, I believe this is from another temple from Sicily. And here you can see she's making, kind of grimacing expression on her face. She's got serpents coming out of her hair. She has serpents around her waist, okay, winged feet as she runs, and so on. Now, Freud, okay, has had it's become a kind of canonical essay published after his death, where he talks about the head of Medusa. And Freud's psychoanalytic interpretation of it, which you're free to accept or reject, okay, was that the nightmare of Medusa in history was due to the horror that a young boy would feel when he first glimpsed female genitals. Okay, that is, that he felt that the decapitation was equivalent to castration, okay, at the level of the unconscious, and that when a young boy saw a woman's genitals for the first time, he suddenly feels that he could lose his own member, okay, and that she has, and that the snakes, okay, in Medusa's hair is actually a vision of pubic hair, okay, and of a woman's genitals. So Freud felt that the Medusa story was actually central to the history of sexuality, but here's the point: is that what Medusa represented, I mean, to just dismiss it as misogyny or whatever, because Medusa was very popular, a very popular image, because she was what's called an apotropaion. Okay, apotropaion is a symbol that you put on an object on your front door to drive away evil spirits. Okay, she sticks out her tongue. Okay, in the same way that when people carve a Halloween pumpkin to look ugly, all those ugly faces. Okay, you put originally. And the night of the living dead, literally, when the spirits come up, okay, on Halloween night and pass by your house, you have put an ugly face with a candle inside of it to scare off, to ward off the evil spirits. Right? There's a lot of that in history. Okay, the gargoyles of medieval cathedrals, okay, with these monstrous figures, dragons on them, and so on. Those are apotropeia as well. Okay, there's all types of them. There's a whole tradition in Italian culture. When I was raised with, there was people wore around their necks. Okay, there was a hand that's doing this, okay, to ward off the evil eye, okay, the malocchia, the evil eye. There was like a long pepper-shaped thing which people wear around their neck, either in red or in gold, okay, in central and southern Italy. The same thing, to ward off evil eye. Some people are said to have the evil eye. Okay, when you pass them in the street, you're supposed to do this, okay, as you pass. So there's all this superstition, okay, from antiquity. I think the extent to which we can say that Medusa is merely misogynistic, I'm not so clear, but there's something humorous about her monstrosity. All right, here's another vision of Medusa, and you see she's got tusks and sticking her tongue out and kind of grinning. I mean, apparently, these apotropeia even appeared on ovens, okay, to make sure that the bread rose, okay, well. They were on the prows of ships, Greek ships. A great eye, you have a great eye, big eye on the side of the prow of a Greek ship, again, to ward off evil spirits. Now here is a person who's cutting the head of Medusa, and she already has the Pegasus under her arm. That's the goddess Athena next to him, and he presents the head of Medusa to Athena as a present, as a gift of thanks, so that she puts it on her chest. That's why we see that on her image and so on, because Athena had helped him conquer Medusa by giving him the mirrored shield by which he could see the reflection of Medusa. There's a tremendous in one of these recreations of Greek myth, Harry Hamlin plays Perseus in one of the most frightening scenes, and where you have the Medusa, and he staggers out with the head of Medusa, and it's like a sex war, okay, where the male principal barely survives extinction in its encounter with the female underworld, etc. So Freud felt that what was particularly significant in the Medusa story was the idea that if you looked at Medusa, a man would turn to stone. Okay, he would be paralyzed, and that's what Freud felt was the significant detail in there. Okay, the idea that you become literally impotent. Okay, at the sight of the monster. All right, let me go forward. Okay, and now the Herms. Okay, all right, the Herms. Here's another interesting thing. I was absolutely appalled when I went to find Herms for you. Okay, how they've been censored. Okay, off the web. Okay, since the last time I looked, the last time I looked for the Herms was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, or maybe 10. All right, but I'm outraged. Okay, that we do not have more instant access to many more Herms. Okay, all right. So what is a Herm? Okay. All right. A Herm is it's a Greek structure. Okay. That was a boundary marker, okay, that had a bearded head on top of a primitive Hermes god, and an erect penis on it. Now, you can imagine what feminist critics immediately had to say about that without any knowledge of the actual meaning of the Herms. Right? They assumed right from the start, okay, that this is a threat. That if you have a figure in the landscape, okay, in Greece, okay, with an erect penis on it, obviously it's a threat. It's about male power, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this is without to make such a statement is to show absolutely no knowledge of the symbolism around the penis in ancient Greek culture. Especially in Athens, where there were the most terms of all, okay, a large penis was considered animalistic, okay? An intelligent man was supposed to have a small penis, all right? All right. In agrarian cultures, the erect penis is considered ridiculous. It's a joke, okay? People joke about it. When people live on a farm, okay, and take animals to stud, okay, and have to deal with horses with their giant penises and bulls with their, and so on, with all of that going on around you as you're growing up, no one thinks seeing a penis is such a big deal, okay? All right. So it's a humorous motif. This is why Aristophanes, okay, in his comedies, had these characters, okay, who had giant leather penises, okay, stuffed with straw, dangling between their legs, because it was ridiculous. It was considering a man who had a large penis was considered to be driven by his penis, okay. He had all of his brains were in his penis, all right. And the superior men, the men who were like following, studying philosophy and were running the government, okay, were expected to have small, shapely penises. Okay, right, but let's start right from there. Okay, then when the motif of the Greek nude was revived at the Renaissance, the same thing. Okay, happened. All of the Italian artists gave their nude figures, like Michelangelo's David and so on, gave them small penises. Okay, so people have complained that's so unrealistic, over time and so on, because that's considered more intelligent. Okay, all right. So the Herms, okay, I love the Herms, okay, and I am outraged at how they've been censored, okay. Right? So here you have this black. So there's this book. Oh, it was called "The Reign of the Phallus." Okay, this was a mid-1980s feminist book, okay, that said that this was the way that men kept women in subservience in ancient Greece, okay, and nothing could be more inaccurate, okay, in my view. All right, there was an incident, you see, just before the Athenians fatally invaded Sicily. Okay, the fleet was about to sail, okay, during the Peloponnesian War to Sicily. This was a disaster that would ruin Athens. Athens would come to an end, really, because of this. Shortly before the fleet sailed, there was in the middle of the night the mutilation of the Herms. Okay, someone went around and knocked the penises off, the Herms. Now, these Herms, again, I want to repeat, they were border markers, okay? They marked boundaries. They marked crossroads, okay? They were the Greeks' tie to an early, very, very early agrarian period. It had to do with fertility. It had to do with the blessings of the god Hermes, always shown. You can see the one on the left is shown very comically. The one on the right is simply an imitation. That's a later edition. That's not an agricultural Herm. The one on the left is. Okay, so the mutilation of the Herm, you could imagine waking up. It's like finding some very major monument has been desecrated and vandalized overnight. So people thought it was a terrible omen, and indeed it turned out to be. But one of the feminist theories that the women went out, the women rebelled and knocked the penises off. Right, women are wandering around at night. Okay, there are women wandering around at night knocking penises off the Herms. I don't think so. Okay, it's more likely that it was either saboteurs, people who are enemies of Athens, or it was a bunch of drunken upper class, frat boys, and that's who actually got blamed. The handsome Alcibiades, okay, about whom there should be a movie. Why is there not? Okay, who Socrates was in love with. Alcibiades and his group were blamed for it. I think probably it was his group. Okay, let me go on. All right, here's another. Here's a close-up of a color picture of the Herm we just saw on the other slide. Okay. All right, now the hermaphrodite figures. All right, so you have this myth in ancient Greece of an intersex creature, okay, who was a combination of male and female, who had female breasts and also a male genitals. And there's various myths about it. It was the child of Hermes and Aphrodite, or there was a figure called Hermaphroditus, he was just a handsome young man who a water nymph fell in love with and embraced and clutched so hard and prayed to the gods that she be joined to him, and so you had this combination figure. So anyway, you have these. It became popular for a long time in antiquity to have this. It's intended to be deceptive. You enter a room, you look at what appears to be a woman lying on a couch, and then you walk around the image, and you see on the other side that the figure has female breasts and also a penis. You see, right? But these, and I should mention that the statue itself is ancient, but the couch, the mattress, was sculpted especially by the great Baroque artist Bernini after this sculpture was discovered. All right, so it's really an erotic motif. It's a pornographic motif. It certainly does not represent the attitude of ancient peoples toward hermaphrodite or intersex figures. It does not indicate any special tolerance of antiquity for intersex figures, because what we mostly know is that if a baby was born with dual genitals, it was considered a bad omen, and the infant would probably be exposed. Okay? In other words, put a baby out on a mountain and let the gods decide whether it will survive or not. There's no evidence of any special protection given to intersex people. But this is an interesting myth, okay, that has many illustrations. Here's another such figure. Well, I actually have the figures and how many there were that survived. Yes, we know. Let's see. Okay, quite a few of them. But let me. There's a standing hermaphrodite. Wait, let me go to the next one. So this is the one which there are so many copies. Okay, this one is interesting. Okay, it's a satyr. Okay, who is a always horny forest creature. Okay, has attacked what he thinks is a sleeping nymph. Okay, the sleeping nymph turns out to be a hermaphrodite. Okay, right. So this was a very popular sculpture grouping. I mean, something like 30 replicas are known from the Roman period, and probably the original was Greek bronze, etc. Right. So what we're seeing here is that the satyr is trying to rape the sleeping nymph, who wakes up, okay, and turns out to have the strength of a man, okay, and the actual face of the hermaphrodite is laughing, okay, and you see the discomfiture of the satyr, getting a smash in the face, okay, the satyr unable to pull the arm off, and then twisting the foot, okay, you see, and probably going to dislocate the satyr's knee, etc. So the whole thing it's a joke, okay? A woman who turns out to have a man's strength, but again, it's a motif that we cannot extrapolate to assert that all ancient peoples accepted the hermaphrodite figure. Most of these figures, if they're discovered, for example, at Pompeii, in Herculaneum, which are buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii was a resort, okay? You cannot, this is another one of the horrible errors, okay, the historical errors made constantly by these gender studies people, okay, and so on. You say, what went down in Pompeii had nothing to do with what the Romans thought in general. Pompeii was like Las Vegas. This is like going to the ruins of Las Vegas 600 years from now and saying, this is how Americans lived, okay? Look at this incredible showgirl, okay? This is how people went to work, okay? People worked like this, okay? Right? It is just so naive, okay? The Romans were extremely puritanical, okay? And then the empire started to go to hell, okay, etc. Okay? But there was a moral vacuum, okay, in the Roman Empire that was filled by, guess what? Christianity, okay, all right, the hollowness, okay, all right, of Roman imperial style with satyrs and hermaphrodites and so on, going on. That's why you had the movement, okay, of Christianity into Mediterranean-wide, impact, all right, and so here it is, like 2,000 years later, this is what happens, okay, all right, the Romans, okay, undoubtedly the elite set who were like vacationing at Capri and so on, all right, thought that they were like the cutting edge of sophistication. They were very progressive, okay, in their attitude. They were openly bisexual. There's no problem, okay. And what happened, okay? The Huns and the Vandals, okay, were like circling around the edges of the empire. The whole thing collapsed, okay, and in came Christianity into the vacuum, which is my warning, okay, about the current attitudes, okay, towards sexuality and everything else. To imagine that we are moving steadily into a progressive and accepting future, okay, is without any reference, okay, to what has happened repeatedly in the past. Okay, seems to me absolutely madness. Okay, all right. At any rate, let me go on. Okay, now, okay, this is the Ephesian Artemis, okay, a very peculiar deity, the city of Ephesus, which appears in the Bible, the letters to St. Paul's letters to the Ephesians, so on. St. Paul went to Ephesus, okay, to challenge the goddess directly. This is one of the capitals of ancient paganism. But what a strange cult object is associated with the great temple of Diana or Artemis at Ephesus. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and now there's hardly anything, of course, of it left. But a very peculiar figure. You can see that she has a mummiform body. It looks like a sarcophagus. She looks like a mummy. She can't walk. Okay, she can't walk any more than those early Stone Age statuettes can walk without any feet. Studding her torso are these things which look like multiple breasts, but probably are, scholars think, bull scrota, okay, that were offered to her in sacrifice. So this is like a very strange cult object. And she had enormous power, okay, in late antiquity. All right. And here's another image of another photo of the same thing. All right. Now this is what you can see here. How it looks very much like breasts. It almost looks like she has animal dugs. That she looks as if like a canine, almost dugs, okay, on her torso. And notice how on her head she is carrying the city again. There's the citadel, okay, of Ephesus. This strange combination of goddess and of woman and architecture. Now this one is, this is called ancient, but in fact it might be a recreation at the late Renaissance or Baroque period. But again, you see these, the strange excrescences on her torso, and the mural crown with the citadel on her crown, on her head as well, and then her complete immobility, okay, with this shrouded lower legs. Now I find this a fascinating object. This is the Nile, okay? This is Roman art, okay? But it's presented, presenting the Nile River of Egypt as if, a father can produce all these babies almost from his flesh. It's very rare. It's almost like Akhenaten and Nefertiti sitting there lounging and caressing their children. And very unusual portrait. You see the images of Egypt there, the crocodile, which the babies are playing with on the left, the Sphinx on the right. This is in the Vatican collection. Now we're into our last section here, which is about the motif of pedophilia, we would call it, okay, or pederasty in ancient Greek culture, okay, something which is clearly not palatable to us any longer. We treat it with, as criminality, today, but this is a very important element in the history of Greek sexuality. So what we're seeing here is an early image, an archaic image of the father god, Zeus, okay, kidnapping the young shepherd boy, Ganymede, Ganymede, to be his cupbearer on Mount Olympus. Right? It's accepted that Zeus was always kidnapping and seducing and abandoning human beings, usually women, okay, whether it's Europa or Leda, whom he attacks in the form of a swan. Right? But this is an example of the acceptance of pederasty, of a grown man having a young boy as a sex object, okay, in antiquity. Let me go forward here. All right. All right. Now we're entering into this the archetype of the beautiful boy, as produced by ancient Greek culture. This is called a kouros sculpture, Kouros. Right. They're athlete figures. There's a clear influence from Egypt. Okay. The Egyptian sculpture it profoundly influenced the beginnings of Greek sculpture. But whereas the ancient Egypt showed a pharaoh, okay, as all powerful, just like we saw Mycerinus, standing in a similar way, the pharaoh Mycerinus, the Greeks are honoring the beauty of a young man. Okay, this is not a political figure. Okay, this is an athlete. Okay? Now it takes a while for the Greek sculptors to discover how to make the human anatomy seem more natural. So there's a kind of stiffness and a rigidity here. But this figure is standing exactly like as a pharaoh would, with 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, and hands clenched to the side. And the hair, they have to discover how do you sculpt hair, because the Egyptians wore wigs. Okay, so at first the Greek sculptors seem to have wigs on. But here's the big difference, right, is that every Egyptian sculpture was originally bonded to a wall. Okay, never do you have Egyptian sculpture in the round. This is the great contribution that Greek art makes. Okay, that is, for the first time now, the human individual steps free, okay, of institutional coercion or identity. Okay, so this is the beginning of the whole Western tradition of freedom of thought, okay, freedom of movement of an individual and of all individuals as equal in society. And so and let me show you how the kouros develops. All right, so here you have this, this is the first time. This is the first surviving sculpture that we have. Okay, that in which you have the motif of what's called contrapposto, Contrapposto, which means when you put your weight on one leg, okay, and allow the other leg to slightly dangle free. Okay? What you do is create a kind of wave of energy in the torso, right, and a kind of twisting of the body that makes the sculpture seem far more natural than anything that came before. So we call this the Critios boy. It's been attributed to the artist Critios. Right? We don't really know if that's true or not. This can't have been the first example of this particular weight on one leg thing, but this is the first surviving example of it. It was found in the rubble of the Acropolis. Okay, after the Persians invaded Athens and invaded Greece, and the Acropolis was destroyed and had to be rebuilt with the Parthenon and so on. This was dug up, okay, within the last 100 years. It is, I have another view of it so you can see the effects of it. But here we get this idealization of the beauty of a young boy, okay, which is part of this institutionalized pederasty, pedophilia in ancient Greek culture. All right, okay, this is another view of it. This is the first time. This is the exact image that I first saw when I was in college and was shown by my art history teacher. And you can see this gives you a very good sense of what it does. You see how on the left, how his weight is on his left leg. Therefore, the right leg is slightly dangling free, and the buttock becomes very, very, fruit-like, and so on, and seductive. That's all I can say. All right. So this sculpture was definitely intended to be walked around, okay, by male connoisseurs, okay, and admired, okay, from the rear, okay. All right. I can remember the shock waves, okay, in my classroom when we saw this. But this motif of the beautiful boy, and of course, it's been one of my obsessions throughout my career. I think it's like. It's why I'm always talking about the gay male sensibility and how intrinsic it is to the Western tradition, and it's had many key moments, including the Neoplatonism of the Renaissance in Florence, homoerotic circles out of which came Leonardo da Vinci and Donatello and Michelangelo and so on. Let me go on with this. Okay, so here we have one of my favorite objects. Here, just simply the head of one of these beautiful boys. This is a head. It's a bronze in the in the Louvre in Paris. And you can see, it's absolutely ravishing, okay, the attention paid to the beauty of a young man, okay, and by, antique, connoisseurs, clearly bisexual or homosexual. And that's the actual red lips here. It's even an alloy that makes him have red lips. The motif is often that the beautiful boy is dreamy and removed, okay? And yes, his body is beautiful. Maybe you can have his body, but you will never get to him, okay? He occupies some other thing, okay? Some other it's almost, like a dream landscape, whatever, okay? There's really a magic, okay, in these boys, in the history of Western art. Now, our final group here, Antinous, okay? Following in this style, the Roman Emperor Hadrian, okay, who is of course we know his name from Hadrian's Wall in Great Britain, remnants of which are still there. The Roman Emperor, he was married, okay, but he fell in love with this boy who we know he was born probably of a Greek family in what would be today Turkey, in the district or area of Bithynia, right? Fell in love with the young man and traveled with him. Right? And then, okay, something happened. We don't know exactly what happened. All right, these are all different images of him. Look how he looks. This is the Madrone Antinous, okay, in the Louvre. It's a colossal head. Okay, it looks almost like a woman if you didn't recognize that it's a young man. Okay, we'll look at it. Here's Hadrian. Okay, Hadrian is wearing a beard because he was a Philhellene. That is, he was part of a circle of Romans who were interested in Greek culture and in war beards and pursued young men as part of the Greek cult based on Athenian high culture. Okay. All right. Now here is this is Antinous in the guise of Osiris. Now these sculptures were produced. Let me go to one more. Okay. You can see he's an Egyptian guy. So I'll explain why. All right. Now here is typical. Okay, of the Antinous sculptures. All right. Antinous died under mysterious circumstances at the age of 19. Traveling with Hadrian, they were on the Nile. Okay, in Egypt. And no one knows what happened, okay, whether Antinous fell in the water and drowned, whether someone murdered him out of jealousy of his political influence over Hadrian, we don't know what. But Hadrian had an extraordinary response to this. He deified, okay, Antinous, made him a god, and had temples raised in his honor all over the Mediterranean. Okay? And so we have an enormous number of these Antinous sculptures, some of which were dug up at the villa of Hadrian in Tivoli, which people visit as part of any visit to Italy. I mean, people just went to Tivoli and started digging and found incredible numbers of these sculptures of, I think that one of him is Osiris was one of them. So now many people mocked and scorned Hadrian. This form of such public grieving was not considered manly at the time, but this was like an incredible event of ancient antiquity with these magnificent sculptures that are absolutely magic. You can see this melancholy, how this whatever it is, this kind of I wouldn't call it brooding, but there's a certain quality in the beautiful young man that the older man can never quite get to. There's something about it. Okay, this removal, this emotional removal, the perfect body with this emotional removal. Why this has not been made into a movie? Okay, because there was a book, a very important modern book written called The Memoirs of Hadrian. Okay, in the early 1950s by a French woman, a lesbian, okay, living with her lover on an island off Maine, okay, Marguerite Yourcenar, okay, she became the first woman actually ever elected to the French, the Academy Française, right? And this is considered a great landmark, Memoirs of Hadrian, okay, which it's all written as if it's Hadrian, right? He's writing to Marcus Aurelius, okay, one of the other Roman emperors, and talking about his life and talking about his love for Antinous and so on. Well, the director John Boorman actually struggled for years to get an Antinous movie going based on the Marguerite Yourcenar novel, and finally had to give up. He couldn't get the financing for it. But it's absolutely scandalous, okay, that this movie hasn't been made. What are they doing in Hollywood with these minor movies? All right, this is like a major story here. All right. So now let me show you the impact of these figures. Here's the end now, as we see the Okay, here. Okay, this is my last image. And here we see 3 examples in the Renaissance, Italian Renaissance, of the influence of this tradition of the beautiful boy, okay, from antiquity. And we see on the left Donatello's David. Now, Donatello was probably gay, for sure, okay, and suffered from guilt, from it, okay, for his entire life. This particular statue I wrote about in detail in Sexual Personae. We don't know what the origin of it was. It was probably commissioned by a rich, gay connoisseur in Florence for a private garden. It certainly was never put on public display. I mean, when you go around it, you can see it's completely, sexual. Look at the way he's standing. Speak of contrapposto, okay? The way on the left, look. I mean, this is the way a streetwalker, okay? It's on a street corner, okay? All right, it's shifting the hips so far, okay? Now, the other thing is that it's David, okay? It's supposedly the story of David and Goliath. There's the head of Goliath that's been cut off, at the very bottom. And then if you close-ups of the face of Goliath, apparently it's Donatello's own head. Okay, it's a portrait of himself, and he's dreaming, okay, to have that foot of a beautiful young boy on his head. Okay, and then it's really quite naughty. That head of Goliath is like armor, and there's a wing, just like a Viking helmet with a wing on it, okay? I don't know if you can see. The wing is creeping up the inside of David's right leg. I don't know if you can see it, okay? All right? And there it goes. Okay, and so on, all right? Tickle, tickle. All right. All right. And then from the back, and then the face, I wish I could show you, the face of David, beautiful, look at the long hair, and that hat. There never has been a hat like that. It's absolutely magnificent hat that could be like in a fashion magazine and so on. All right. So, and then in the middle is Verrocchio's David, less sexual, okay? And then on the right is finally, in this series, the Michelangelo's famous David that was intended for an outside plaza in Florence. David is the symbol of Florence itself, defeating the older and more powerful other nations, as the young shepherd David defeated Goliath with his with a slingshot and so on. But now there's a kind of a temple, okay, which is showing this David, and you can see the odd proportions of the David, because when the camera is raised up on a platform and looking at directly at the David, that's never the way that David was supposed to be seen, because everyone is supposed to be on the ground looking up, and so you have this there's a kind of oddness of proportion that makes the head seem a little larger and so on and so forth. All right, but that is this is the homoerotic tradition, okay, the idealization of a beautiful young man that now for us has all kinds of moral complications. We cannot fully endorse this any longer. Nevertheless, it's one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of aesthetics. All right, so that is the end of my slideshow for you. All right.